Finally tonight, the story of a man on a never-ending mission of kindness and how it's changing lives.
It started with a little girl, a cardboard sign, and a dream too big for her tiny stand to hold. 7-year-old Sarah wasn't selling lemonade for pocket money. She was fighting for her life. Every cup she poured was a means of survival until one hot afternoon. One man in sunglasses stopped, and hours later, Sarah's world turned upside down. What did he say that made millions of people rally behind Sarah? And how did her lemonade stand spark a chain of events? Stick with us, because this story only gets more unbelievable from here. A little girl's stand against the impossible. Sarah Johnson was only 7 years old when life changed in ways most adults would struggle to handle. Doctors had given her family news that no parent ever wants to hear. Their little girl needed chemotherapy. The treatments were expensive, and the cost was far beyond what the Johnsons could manage. Bills piled up quickly. Her father had lost his job when the town's factory closed, and her mother was left trying to make every coin stretch further than it should. Many nights, she quietly skipped her own meals so the children wouldn't go hungry. Life had turned into a daily struggle against bills, time, and fear, with no clear way forward. Sarah saw more than her parents thought. She noticed the pile of unopened envelopes growing on the kitchen table, the way her father sat in silence longer than usual, and the tired look in her mother's eyes. Even as a child, she understood that her medicine and hospital visits were pushing the family past its breaking point. So, instead of waiting for things to get better, Sarah chose to try. On a warm afternoon, she dragged a small table to the edge of their yard and set up a lemonade stand, not just for pocket money, but as her way of helping to keep her family afloat. Her sign read, "Lemonade to pay for chemo." Each word showed her determination to fight an illness she didn't fully understand, but knew she had to beat. The stand itself was simple: a folding chair, a plastic table, a cooler filled with ice, and a stack of cups. The lemonade was homemade, mixed with care by her mother, who quietly hoped it might bring in at least a little relief. Neighbors noticed quickly, and curiosity drew people in. This was not a child playing at business. This was a child trying to save her own life. At first, it was the community around her that stepped forward. Local families stopped by after work, paying far more than the 50 cents she asked for. Some left small bills. Others brought groceries. A few brought notes of encouragement. The story began spreading beyond the block. People passing through the area would stop, not because they were thirsty, but because they wanted to help. Word of mouth carried faster than expected, and soon Sarah's small corner stand became a symbol of struggle and resilience. In small towns across America, lemonade stands are usually just a childhood pastime, a way for kids to earn pocket change, learn a little about responsibility, and feel grown up for an afternoon. But Sarah's stand was born out of something far heavier. She stayed at her post even when the summer sun pressed down on her shoulders, knowing that every cup she handed across that table brought her one step closer to the treatments keeping her alive. In the United States, families facing serious illness often find themselves buried under impossible costs. Childhood cancer care can climb into the hundreds of thousands of dollars, even with insurance in place. For those without steady work, the bills arrive faster than the help. Sarah's parents had filled out every form they could find, but the aid moved slowly and the clock did not. That's when her little stand began to show what a community could do when drawn together by a story that cut deep. Neighbors who had once only waved in passing started stopping by every day. Some carried bags of lemons, so she would never run out. Local bakers dropped off cookies to stack neatly beside the cups. Teachers told their students about her, and soon groups of children showed up with spare coins clutched in their fists. What started as a single child's effort turned into a gathering place where kindness poured as freely as the lemonade itself. It was on one of those afternoons, with the sun beating down and Sarah quietly serving cups of lemonade, that a man walked by. So many had stopped before, but his decision to stop and engage with Sarah would soon shock not just the Johnson family, but thousands of people who would hear about what happened next. Who was this stranger, and why did he stop? The stranger who refused to walk past. The lemonade stand had been on the corner for days. Neighbors already knew Sarah Johnson's sign, the simple cardboard letters spelling out her plea: lemonade to pay for chemo. Most people walking by gave a glance and kept moving, their minds on work or errands. A few stopped to hand her $1 or buy a cup, but for the most part, life continued as usual around her. That changed when a man in dark sunglasses came down the path. He wore a plain cap pulled low, not drawing much attention at first. Unlike others who only glanced, he slowed, watching her carefully. Sarah was busy handing out a small cup to another passerby. She thanked them softly, then looked back at her nearly empty cooler. The man watched for a while, studying the worn sign, the folding chair, and the tired-looking child running the stand. What drew him in was the way Sarah treated every person who stopped. Some customers gave only coins, others offered small bills. One woman handed her groceries instead of cash, and Sarah accepted it with the same nod of gratitude. The man finally approached. He placed a bill on the table, but he did not take a cup. Instead, he asked a few quiet questions about why the girl was there. Sarah explained the basics: her need for chemotherapy, her family's struggle with bills, and her idea to sell lemonade as a way to help. She spoke simply, not with the polished tone of someone rehearsed, but with the honesty of a child caught in circumstances far bigger than herself. By this point, cancer treatment costs in America were widely reported. Childhood chemotherapy could cost tens of thousands of dollars in a single cycle, with families often paying high amounts even if they had coverage. Stories of parents falling into debt to save their children had become all too common, and yet seeing it up close through the eyes of a 7-year-old made the crisis impossible to ignore. The man's interest grew sharper as he watched Sarah hand a free drink to a man carrying a plastic bag filled with cans. Her decision to give without asking for anything in return showed him she was serving her community, even though she needed help herself. He asked for her parents' number, noting it down before quietly stepping back. Sarah assumed he was just another customer offering support. She had no idea that this brief encounter would trigger a chain of events beyond her family's small neighborhood. Later that day, the man posted a short note online about the girl he had met. He included a photo of the lemonade stand, the handwritten sign, and the determined face behind it. In the age of social media, stories spread fast when they carry the right mix of struggle, innocence, and hope. By the end of the evening, the post had gained thousands of shares. Within 24 hours, it had reached audiences far beyond the local area. Search engines began indexing the story under keywords tied to childhood cancer, lemonade stands, and community fundraising. News outlets scanning for viral topics picked it up. Local stations sent reporters to verify the details. And soon, Sarah's street corner was filled with cameras. Donations poured in through digital payment apps linked to the family. The stand that once relied on loose change was suddenly tied to a national conversation about medical costs and the lengths families must go to for treatment. For Sarah, the attention was overwhelming, but also life-saving. The money raised began covering her chemotherapy sessions, lifting a weight that had threatened to crush her family. Behind the scenes, William, the man in sunglasses, watched as his single post fueled the wave. The lemonade stand now carried symbolic weight. Children in nearby towns began setting up their own stands, inspired by Sarah's story. Schools used the example to teach students about empathy and action. The stranger who refused to walk past had unknowingly started something much bigger than he planned, and as donations continued to grow, one question spread with them. Who is this little girl who had stood alone on the corner, selling lemonade, to pay for chemo? Life beyond the lemonade stand. Behind the bright cups of lemonade and the smile she offered strangers stood a little girl, still trying to hold on to a normal life. At her age, school should have been the center of her world, rushing through hallways, giggling with friends at recess, and complaining about homework. For a while, it was. She loved being in class, answering questions with the kind of enthusiasm only a child can bring. Her teachers remembered how her hand was always the first to shoot up, whether it was math problems or a story assignment. But cancer has a way of changing everything. The treatments left her tired, often too weak to make it through a full day at school. Some mornings she woke up ready to go, determined not to let illness win. Other mornings, the walk from her bed to the door felt like climbing a mountain. Her classmates noticed the empty chair, and soon her teachers began sending lessons home. They attached notes of encouragement, sometimes small doodles in the margins, to remind her that she was missed. Her classmates made get-well cards filled with colorful drawings of sunshine and hearts. Even with all this kindness, it was never easy. She wanted to be in the middle of everything, not watching from the sidelines. Missing birthday parties and school trips stung in a way that medicine couldn't heal. While other kids talked about playground games or after-school clubs, she was scheduling hospital visits and counting down the days until her next round of chemotherapy. Outside of school, she used to spend hours sketching animals in a little notebook. Horses were her favorite, each one carefully shaded with a mane that seemed to move across the page. Drawing became her escape during the long hospital stays. Nurses often found her curled up with colored pencils scattered around her bed, lost in a world she could control with her imagination. Sports were harder to hold on to. Before her diagnosis, she liked running races in the schoolyard, her hair flying behind her as she pushed herself to the finish line. But chemo drained her energy, leaving her legs shaky and her breath short. Some days, she would still lace up her sneakers and beg her mom to let her try. She never managed to run as far as before, but even a few steps gave her a sense of victory. Her social life changed, too. Kids her age often don't know what to say about illness, and some friends slowly drifted away, unsure how to act around her. Yet a smaller, stronger circle remained. They would sit beside her during class on the days she made it in, or come by her house just to watch movies and eat popcorn. For them, she wasn't the girl with cancer. She was simply their friend. The lemonade stand, in a way, gave her a new kind of social world. People didn't just stop by for a paper cup of lemonade. Neighbors stayed longer while classmates pulled up chairs. Even strangers who had only heard her name came and stayed a while. Her parents carried the harder truth. They were there for the good moments, watching her face brighten when friends remembered to include her. And they were there for the hard ones, too, when she curled up and cried because her body couldn't keep up. They knew the toll of the hospital trips, how the long treatments left her small frame shaky and spent. But they also knew her fire. She still pushed through homework, still scribbled crayons across pages, still insisted on living outside the narrow limits her illness tried to force on her. Childhood had been stolen from her in so many ways. Hours lost to waiting rooms, days lost to recovery. And yet, she held on to something untouched, her stubborn will to keep being herself. This was the life behind the headlines. A young girl who was not only fighting for survival, but also for the everyday moments other children take for granted. The story doesn't end here. The sound of a single phone call carried news that would alter a young girl's world in ways no one could have expected. What could have been said on the other end of the line? Just one phone call. The morning after the post of the lemonade stand by William, Sarah's father, was still thinking about the kindness of a stranger who had stopped to help his daughter. He never expected to hear from William again. To him, it had been one of those fleeting moments where someone does a good deed and disappears. But life had other plans. His phone rang early that morning. On the line was William's team. They weren't calling for a photo opportunity or another headline. They wanted to meet in person. Sarah's father was cautious at first. Over the past months, he had seen promises made and broken, people who said they wanted to help, but only stayed long enough to snap a picture or tell a story. This call felt different, though. William wasn't looking for recognition. He wanted to change their lives. When they met, William sat down with Sarah's family and listened. He listened to the story of a little girl who should have been laughing with her friends at recess, but instead was fighting cancer with all the strength her small body could muster. He listened to the story of a father who had been forced to watch helplessly as hospital bills stacked up higher than he could ever pay. And then William made a promise. He told Sarah's father that every medical bill from that day forward would be covered. The family would never again have to choose between groceries and treatment, between rent and the next round of chemotherapy. But William didn't stop there. He knew that charity alone couldn't mend the quiet ache of a man who felt like he had failed his children. So he went a step further. He arranged steady work for Sarah's father, not temporary labor or short-term handouts, but real, dependable work that restored a sense of dignity. For a man who had spent nights staring at the ceiling, wondering how to provide, that job was more than income. It was hope. Sarah's father described the moment as one that lifted a weight he had carried for years. It wasn't just about money. It was about feeling seen, about someone recognizing the struggle and offering not pity, but partnership. For him, William's support was redemption, a chance to step back into his role as a father with pride instead of shame. For Sarah, the changes were immediate. With the bills taken care of, she no longer overheard hushed arguments about money at the kitchen table. The house felt lighter. She could focus on her schoolwork again, even if some days her body was too weak to keep up. Teachers noticed her spark returning. The smile that had been missing during long hospital stays was creeping back onto her face. The chemotherapy still took its toll, of course. Some days, she was too tired to lift her head from the pillow. Her hair thinned, her appetite faded, and her body ached in ways no child should ever have to endure. But the shadow of financial fear no longer loomed over every decision. The family could concentrate on her healing, on making her comfortable, and on finding small joys even in difficult moments. Her father often said that William had not just saved his daughter's life, but had given him back the ability to be her dad. Instead of spending every waking hour scrambling for money, he could sit with her through treatments, read to her at night, and be present in a way he hadn't been able to before. In the months that followed, Sarah grew stronger. There were setbacks, as there always are in battles with cancer. But she faced them with courage. Her classmates began calling her the toughest kid in school. And teachers marveled at her determination to keep up with her studies, even while hooked up to IV drips. The phone call that morning had changed everything. For Sarah, it meant the chance to keep fighting. For her father, it meant standing tall again, knowing he hadn't failed his children. And for William, it was proof that sometimes the greatest impact comes not from grand gestures, but from choosing to truly see someone and carry their burden alongside them. What came next turned Sarah's small lemonade stand into a nationwide spark that nobody saw coming. How did one frightened child's idea ripple across an entire country? Wave of kindness. Sarah's story soon traveled far beyond that corner. For many in her neighborhood, it was the first time they saw a child openly confront something so heavy. Yet it was not pity that drew people closer. It was the clear determination behind her small table and plastic cups. The first days brought neighbors. The next week brought strangers who had heard whispers of the stand through local word of mouth. Soon after, community newspapers began to feature her. Sarah's sign, simple and unpolished, became a symbol people could not ignore. When photos of Sarah's lemonade stand reached the internet, the reaction was immediate. Posts under the hashtag number Lemonade for Hope started appearing on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Parents shared her story with their children, classrooms discussed it, and local businesses reposted it to their audiences. What had started with a folding chair and a pitcher of lemonade became a topic thousands of families were talking about online. Data showed that searches for the phrase "lemonade stand for charity" jumped significantly during those months. Crowdfunding platforms even noticed a spike in campaigns linked to children selling lemonade for medical costs or community causes. The digital wave proved that people were not just moved by Sarah's effort, they wanted to be part of it. Soon, children in other states began setting up their own lemonade stands. In Ohio, a group of fifth graders lined their school sidewalk with cups and raised money for local hospitals. In Texas, siblings sold lemonade outside a grocery store and donated the proceeds to cancer research. From California to New York, stories surfaced of kids holding hand-drawn signs modeled after Sarah's. The story might have ended there, but one man decided it should not. William, who had once stopped by Sarah's stand as just another passerby, returned months later with something far greater than a purchase. What William brought was a lemonade cart that ran on solar power, made especially for Sarah. He also set up a scholarship in her name, a promise that her future would be safe. For a girl who once sold cups of lemonade for 50 cents to pay for her treatment, this was more than kindness. It was security, something her family had not felt in a long time. The story didn't fade away. Before long, nonprofits were using Sarah's stand as proof that small ideas could make a big difference. Teachers shared her story in class to show lessons of care and responsibility. Health workers also spoke about her when pointing out the hard costs families face during treatment. Each mention carried her message further, proving that a child's determination could highlight gaps in a system and inspire solutions. What makes Sarah's lemonade stand remarkable is not only the money it raised, but the chain reaction it sparked. It tapped into something universal, the belief that even small contributions matter when combined. Lemonade became more than a drink. It became a language of kindness spoken across playgrounds, classrooms, and neighborhoods. And at the center of it was one little girl who refused to stay silent about her needs. Her story linked strangers together, pushed communities to act, and showed that courage can come from the most unexpected places. How different would Sarah's journey have been without William's decision to step in when he did? And what do you think William benefited from his decision to help? Let us know what you think. Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy it.